The hiss came first, that sharp burning mist cutting through the air, then my wife's scream. I turned just in time to see Karen, our HOA president, arm outstretched, pepper spray in hand, blasting my disabled wife in the face, like she was some kind of criminal. Laura's wheelchair rolled back as she coughed and clawed for breath, her eyes red, her skin burning. Neighbors froze on their lawns, stunned, as Karen sneered and said, "Community safety comes first." Can you imagine? She thought attacking a disabled woman was keeping order. What Karen didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that the woman she just assaulted wasn't some helpless victim. Laura is a judge, a fearsome one. And this HOA queen was about to learn what real authority looks like. Before we dive into the chaos, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these stories reach. When people ask me why I hate HOAs with the fire of 1,000 suns, I usually just tell them this story. Because if you've ever wondered what it's like to meet the Queen of Pettiness herself, I can give you a play-by-play of our very first encounter with Karen. It started on moving day. You'd think that would be the happiest moment for a family like ours: new house, new neighborhood, new chapter. My wife Laura was excited to finally have a space where we could breathe away from the cramped city apartment that was about as wheelchair-friendly as a mountain cliff. We spent weeks planning, choosing furniture that could fit her needs, arranging the delivery schedule so everything would be smooth. By the time the moving truck pulled up, Laura had this smile on her face that I hadn't seen in years. It was the kind of smile that said, "Finally, we can live." I was sweating buckets, unloading boxes, when I heard the clack of heels on the driveway. At first, I thought it might be a neighbor coming to welcome us. You know, the old-fashioned pie on the porch routine. Instead, I got Karen. She was dressed like she had just walked off the set of a political drama, tailored blazer hair sprayed into a golden helmet, and a clipboard clutched like it was the Constitution itself. Her eyes flicked over me, then over Laura, sitting in her chair, directing me where to place the fragile boxes. "Excuse me," she said, smiling with her teeth but not her eyes. "I'm Karen, the president of the Pinecrest Meadows Homeowners Association. I like to personally greet new residents to ensure they're aware of our expectations." Right off the bat, I knew this wasn't a welcome wagon. This was an inspection. I wiped the sweat off my forehead and stuck out my hand. "James," I said, "and this is my wife Laura. We're just settling in. Excited to be here." Her handshake was limp, like touching a wet rag. She didn't even look at me. Her gaze was already locked on the wheelchair ramp we had installed earlier that morning. "Is this permanent?" she asked, tapping her pen against the clipboard. Laura raised an eyebrow. "That's my accessibility ramp," she said flatly. "Yes, it's permanent." Karen's smile didn't move. "Well, technically, any exterior modification must be approved by the board. Wheelchair or not, we have aesthetic standards to maintain. We wouldn't want the neighborhood to look industrial." I swear my blood pressure spiked so fast I could hear the ringing in my ears. Industrial. That ramp was a clean, modern design, aluminum rails, non-slip surface, something I spent hours researching so my wife could move safely. And here this woman was acting like it was an eyesore, because it didn't match her precious suburban, cookie-cutter fantasy. I laughed mostly because, if I didn't, I'd have blown up right there. "It's a ramp, Karen, not a nuclear power plant." Laura gave me that look, the one that said, "Let it go, James." But I could see the steel forming in her eyes, too. Karen ignored my sarcasm and started writing something on her clipboard. "We'll have to discuss this at the next board meeting. In the meantime, please make sure your lawn doesn't exceed 3 inches in height, keep your trash cans out of sight except on pickup days, and no overnight street parking. Oh, and dogs must be leashed at all times. If you have pets, we'll need to see vaccination records." I almost asked her if she wanted my dental records too. Instead, I muttered, "Got it. Lawn, trash, no parking. Don't worry, we'll play by your little rule book." Karen turned, heels clicking again, and strutted back toward her house like she had just laid down the law of the land. Laura chuckled once she was gone, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. Well, that didn't take long. 3 hours in, and we've already been inspected. I bent down, brushed the sweat-soaked hair off her forehead, and kissed her. "Don't let her get under your skin. She's just a busybody with a clipboard." Laura's voice dropped low. "No, James. She's dangerous. I can smell it." At the time, I thought she was exaggerating. I mean, sure, Karen was annoying, controlling, and had the personality of a tax audit, but dangerous, I didn't realize yet how far she'd go. The rest of the day, I kept catching glimpses of her across the street, peeking through her blinds, scribbling notes. Once she even snapped a photo on her phone of our driveway when I left the moving truck parked there for a little too long. Laura noticed too, her lips tightening each time. That night, after we finished unpacking the essentials and collapsed on the couch, Laura turned to me. She's going to test us. The ramp, the chair, me. She doesn't like difference. People like her never do. I put my arm around her, then let her test. She has no idea who she's dealing with. And that was true. Because while Karen thought she was queen of Pinecrest Meadows armed with her petty bylaws and fines, she didn't know my wife. She didn't know Laura was sharper than any blade, tougher than any bully, and holding a gavel that had put real criminals behind bars. The storm was coming. And moving day was just the first drizzle. If moving day was a drizzle, then the weeks that followed were a full-on monsoon of HOA harassment. Karen didn't waste a second. While most neighbors were still figuring out our names, she was already building a legal case against us in her own twisted mind. The first letter showed up 2 days after we moved in. Not an email, not a polite knock on the door, an actual printed notice stuffed into our mailbox like it was the IRS coming after us. Violation unauthorized structure. That was the subject line stamped in bold letters across the top. The letter claimed that our wheelchair ramp, yes, the same ramp Karen had hissed about on moving day, was an unapproved alteration to the exterior of the property. According to her, it clashed with the aesthetic harmony of Pinecrest Meadows. I read it out loud at the kitchen table. Laura sat across from me, sipping her tea with that calm, collected look she always wore when she was calculating her next move. Aesthetic harmony, I muttered. It's a ramp, not a Ferris wheel. What does she want us to do? Catapult you through the front door every morning. Laura smirked, but her eyes didn't leave the page. She's fishing, testing boundaries. She wants to see how much we'll tolerate before we push back. Well, she's about to find out, I said, crumpling the letter. I'll mail it back to her in pieces. But Laura shook her head. Not yet. Let her play. Let's see how far she goes. And boy, did she go far. The second notice came a few days later. Violation: excessive medical equipment on display. I swear I almost fell out of my chair laughing when I read that one. Excessive medical equipment. What was she talking about? My wife's wheelchair, her oxygen tank. Did Karen want us to stash the wheelchair in the garage and carry Laura around like a sack of potatoes to keep the neighborhood aesthetic? She's unhinged, I said, waving the paper. Laura only gave me that tight-lipped smile. No, James. She's deliberate. She's trying to document a pattern, make us look like a nuisance. And she wasn't just sending letters. Oh no, Karen had graduated to full-on surveillance. I'd catch her lurking near our property line, snapping photos with her phone zooming in on the ramp, Laura's chair, even the van with its wheelchair lift. Sometimes she'd strut across the street pretending to check her mail, but really her eyes never left our house. The whispers started too. At the grocery store, I overheard a woman from down the block whispering to another, "That poor man's wife, I heard, she's making the neighborhood look run down." Run down. My wife? The woman who survived years of physical challenges with more grace and grit than any of these Stepford wives in training could dream of. Laura noticed the whispers, of course. She noticed everything, but she never let it break her composure. She'd just roll her chair a little taller, straighten her back, and smile that calm, dangerous smile. "She's scared of me," Laura said one night as we sat on the porch. The summer air was thick cicadas humming in the trees. Karen was across the street pretending to water her plants at 9 o'clock at night. "Scared of you. She's harassing you, Laura." "No," Laura said. "She's terrified. Terrified that I don't bend. Bullies like her only feel powerful when people cower. I don't cower. That unsettles her." I believed her. I always did. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't going to stop at letters and gossip. Karen was the kind of person who escalated when she didn't get her way. And I was right. The next week, I came home from work to find Laura sitting in the driveway, arms crossed, eyes blazing. Our mailbox had been plastered with neon orange violation tags, 5 of them fluttering in the wind like some kind of HOA crime scene. Lawn too long, trash cans visible, improper vehicle in driveway, unapproved structure, unsightly equipment. Karen had gone down the entire checklist, inventing violations as if she were scoring us in some twisted HOA Olympics. Laura held up one of the tags like it was a trophy. She actually fined us for parking too close to our own garage. That night I paced the living room, fists clenched. This is harassment. Plain and simple. I'm calling the police. But Laura shook her head again. Not yet. Let her keep digging her own grave. You're too calm, I said. She pepper sprays you, she stalks you, she finds you, and you just sit here drinking tea like it's all part of some plan. Laura finally looked me dead in the eye. It is part of a plan. She doesn't know who I am, James. And when she finds out, she'll wish she had never laid eyes on this ramp. Her voice sent a chill through me, because I knew she meant it. The very next day, the harassment reached its breaking point. I was out mowing the lawn, yes, at exactly 2.5 inches just to spite Karen when I saw her marching down the street, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on. That smug smile plastered across her face. She stopped right at the edge of our driveway, snapping more photos. Afternoon, I said, killing the mower. Need another photo for your scrapbook. She tilted her head, lips curling. You're out of compliance, Mr. Taylor. Again. You people really aren't a good fit for Pinecrest Meadows. You people, I repeated, meaning what, Karen people with wheelchairs? Or just people who don't bow down to you? Her jaw tightened. For the first time, I saw the mask slip. But instead of backing down, she leaned in closer. Consider this your last warning. Laura rolled out onto the porch just then, eyes sharp, voice steady. Or what she asked. Karen sneered. Or you'll regret it. She turned on her heel and stomped away, leaving her threat hanging in the humid summer air like a storm cloud. And that's when I knew this wasn't harassment anymore. This was war. You ever have one of those moments where time slows down, like the universe is giving you a front row seat to the worst decision someone will ever make in their life? That was the afternoon Karen attacked my wife. It was a sunny Saturday, the kind of day meant for barbecues and lazy porch swings. I was in the garage reorganizing tools that never seemed to stay put when I heard voices rising out front. At first I thought it was just another one of Karen's driveway drive-bys, where she'd bark orders and snap photos like the neighborhood paparazzi. But the tone was sharper this time, harsher. I stepped out, and there it was. Karen standing at the bottom of our ramp, sunglasses flashing in the sunlight, clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. And Laura calm as ever in her chair on the porch, refusing to be intimidated. Mrs. Taylor, Karen said, her voice cutting across the yard, I've given you ample warnings. Your continued non-compliance with HOA regulations will not be tolerated. Laura tilted her head, almost amused. Non-compliance, you mean existing, because last I checked I have a legal right to enter my own home safely. Karen's nostrils flared. Don't get smart with me. Your ramp, your equipment, your condition, it's lowering property values. Families are starting to complain. That was the moment my blood boiled. Condition, like my wife was some sort of disease. I moved closer, ready to put myself between them, but Laura raised her hand, keeping me back. She didn't want me to fight her battle. Not this one. You don't get to decide my worth, Laura said, voice low but steady. That should have been the end of it. Any sane person would have huffed, scribbled another fake violation, and stormed off to go terrorize their begonias. But Karen wasn't sane. She was drunk on her own imaginary power. It happened so fast. 1 second Karen was digging through her oversized purse, the next she pulled out a small black canister. Pepper spray. She flicked the cap open with a click that felt louder than thunder. You leave me no choice, she snapped, her voice trembling, not with fear but with self-righteous fury. And then, hiss. The orange mist shot out in a wide arc straight into Laura's face. The sound my wife made, I'll never forget it. A strangled gasp, followed by a cough that rattled through her chest. Her wheelchair jerked backward as her eyes slammed shut, tears streaming instantly. She clawed at the air, choking, blinded her skin already burning red. Laura, I shouted, sprinting toward her. But Karen wasn't done. She stood there, arm extended, spraying like she was some kind of vigilante cop in a suburban action movie. This is self-defense, she screamed. You threatened me with your defiance. Defiance. That was her word for it. My wife had defied her HOA empire, and in Karen's twisted mind, that justified chemical assault. I shoved past Karen, knocking her arm down, and caught Laura's chair before it tipped back. She was coughing violently, tears streaming her lips, gasping for air. My chest tightened, panic and rage colliding in a single heartbeat. Hang on, honey, I whispered, wheeling her toward the hose. I've got you. Behind me, Karen kept ranting, shouting about protecting the community, her voice shrill, echoing across the yards. And then I realized we weren't alone. Neighbors had gathered. Doors cracked open, blinds pulled back. A few families stood frozen on their lawns, hands covering their mouths. Kids clung to their parents' legs. Everyone had seen it. The Queen of Pinecrest Meadows, HOA, Karen herself, had just pepper-sprayed a disabled woman in broad daylight. One man muttered, "What the hell?" Another whispered, "Did she really?" Yes, she did. I turned, fury blazing through me, and pointed straight at Karen. You just assaulted my wife. In front of witnesses. She didn't flinch. If anything, she puffed her chest out. I was within my rights. She was aggressive. She was hostile. I feared for my safety. Aggressive, hostile Laura was half-blinded, clinging to the arms of her chair while I flushed her eyes with the hose. You're finished, Karen, I growled. But Laura, even half-blinded and coughing, still had that spark. Between gasps, she croaked, "Don't waste your anger on her, James. She doesn't know who she just picked a fight with." I met her eyes, red, swollen, but still burning with that calm fire, and I knew exactly what she meant. Karen thought she'd won. Thought her little spray can had finally put us in our place. But what she didn't realize was that she hadn't just pepper sprayed a disabled woman, she had pepper sprayed a judge. A woman who had spent her life wielding the law like a sword, dismantling liars and bullies in courtrooms that would make this cul-de-sac look like a dollhouse. And this time, the courtroom was coming to her. Neighbors whispered, phones out, cameras recording. Karen's face, once smug, flickered with unease as she realized just how public her victory had been. But it was too late. The damage was done. I crouched beside Laura, holding her hand as the water washed over her burning eyes. "We'll make her pay for this," I whispered. Laura squeezed my hand weakly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Oh, James, she has no idea how much." And right there, with neighbors staring, with Karen sputtering excuses, with my wife trembling but unbroken, I knew the tide had shifted. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. Karen had declared war, and she had no idea she'd just armed her enemy with the most powerful weapon of all, the law. Hospitals always smelled the same to me, antiseptic and old coffee. That night, as I sat beside Laura's bed, the sting of pepper spray still clung to my own nostrils from carrying her inside. Her eyes were red and puffy, her breathing raspy, but even in that weakened state she looked composed, strong. I, on the other hand, was a storm. My fists clenched, my jaw locked so tight it hurt. Images of Karen's smug face replayed over and over, that hiss of spray like a nightmare on loop. "I should have tackled her right there," I muttered, pacing the room. "I should have called the police on the spot. She assaulted you, Laura. In front of witnesses. In broad daylight." Laura reached out a hand, her fingers trembling only slightly, and caught mine mid-rant. "James," she whispered, her voice still hoarse, "sit down." I did, reluctantly gripping her hand, like it was the only thing anchoring me to earth. Her lips curved into a smile. Not weak, not broken. A smile that carried weight. Power. "Don't waste your fury," she said. "Karen just handed me exactly what I needed." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Laura took a deep breath, wincing as her lungs still burned from the chemical residue. "James, I've dealt with people like her before. Not HOA presidents, but bullies all the same. They puff themselves up, wave authority around like a badge, and think rules make them untouchable. Do you know what happens when someone like that finally oversteps?" I shook my head. "They fall," Laura said, simply. "And I make sure they don't get back up." For the first time since the attack, her eyes, though swollen and bloodshot, gleamed with something fierce. "You sound like a prosecutor," I said slowly. Laura's smile widened, and that was the moment she finally pulled back the curtain she'd been holding. "Not a prosecutor, James. A judge." The words hung in the sterile hospital air like thunder. I blinked. "You're telling me all this time you never mentioned—" "I wanted a quiet life outside the courtroom," Laura interrupted softly. "But I've spent the last 15 years on the bench, and I'm not just any judge. Ask the attorneys who've stood in my courtroom. They call me the gavel with teeth." I stared, equal parts, stunned and proud. My wife, my brilliant, resilient wife, had been hiding the fact that she wasn't just strong, she was a force of nature cloaked in robes. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, though the pride in my voice betrayed my question. "Because I didn't need to. Until now." Her fingers tightened around mine, a flicker of fire in her eyes. "Karen thinks she's above the law because she's memorized a stack of HOA bylaws. She has no idea she just attacked the law itself. James, she handed me jurisdiction without realizing it." I couldn't help but laugh, bitter at first, then growing louder, freer. "Oh, Karen, she really picked the wrong target this time." Laura chuckled too, though the sound cracked against her sore throat. "Exactly. But listen to me. Don't let your anger drive this. That's what she expects. Neighbors yelling, police reports, chaos. She'll spin herself as the victim. What she won't expect is precision, patience. A case built so airtight she suffocates in her own lies." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "So what's the plan?" Laura's eyes sparkled. "We let her keep digging. She'll overplay her hand again. She always does. And when she does, I'll be ready to make my move. Not as a neighbor, not as your wife, as a judge." I felt a shiver run through me, not of fear, but of anticipation. The kind of feeling you get when you realize the storm isn't over, it's just gathering strength. The next morning, Laura was discharged, her burns treated, her eyes medicated. She refused to use a wheelchair-accessible transport van, insisting on rolling herself out of the hospital doors under her own strength. That was Laura in a nutshell, pepper-sprayed one day, steel-willed the next. As we drove back into Pinecrest Meadows, I noticed the blinds twitching, neighbors peeking. Word had spread. They'd all seen the attack, recorded it, whispered about it. Some of them even waved awkwardly, as if to apologize for Karen's madness. But Karen herself, she stood on her porch, arms folded, face twisted with defiance like nothing had happened. "She's not scared yet," I muttered. "She will be," Laura said, her voice calm, almost amused. That night I caught her at the dining table, not resting but working. Papers spread out, HOA bylaws, highlighted case law references stacked in neat piles. She flipped through them with surgical precision, her pen jotting notes faster than I could follow. "You're really building a case," I said, awe creeping into my tone. Laura didn't look up. "I don't build cases. I build for dicks." And right then I realized Karen wasn't just facing angry homeowners anymore. She wasn't facing gossip or petitions. She was facing Judgment Day itself, wrapped in a black robe and armed with a gavel sharper than any weapon. For now, we waited. We let Karen keep puffing herself up, keep parading her clipboard, keep believing she was untouchable, because the higher she climbed, the harder she would fall. And Laura, she was already tightening the noose. You'd think after pepper spraying a disabled woman in broad daylight, Karen might try lying low for a while, maybe disappear behind her blinds, lick her wounds, or at least wait for the gossip to die down. But not Karen. Oh no. If there's one thing you can count on with a tyrant, it's that they never see themselves as the villain. 2 weeks after the attack, a thick packet landed on our doorstep. It wasn't flowers, it wasn't an apology. It was a summons emergency HOA board meeting. The subject line alone read like a personal vendetta re disciplinary action against James and Laura Taylor. I tore it open, skimmed through the nonsense, and nearly laughed myself hoarse. According to Karen, we were guilty of unauthorized modifications, the ramp, repeated noncompliance with HOA regulations, wheelchair visible van and driveway, hostile behavior toward the HOA president, aka not bowing to her every demand, endangering the community. Yes, she actually wrote that. The kicker, she was calling for a vote to fine us into oblivion and, if necessary, pursue removal of the Taylors from Pinecrest Meadows. Eviction. From our own home. Because my wife had the audacity to exist in a wheelchair. I shoved the packet across the table to Laura. She flipped through it calmly, her eyes scanning line after line, lips twitching into the faintest of smiles. "She's overreaching," Laura murmured. "Good. Overreach is the easiest thing to dismantle." "You're not worried?" I asked. Laura finally looked up, her eyes glittering. "James, she's calling an emergency meeting to accuse a sitting judge of being a public nuisance. I couldn't script this better if I tried." And so the stage was set. The night of the meeting, the HOA clubhouse buzzed like a wasp's nest. Every folding chair was filled, neighbors crammed shoulder to shoulder, some out of morbid curiosity, others whispering nervously. Even the ones who hated Karen's guts showed up because nothing draws a crowd like a scandal. Karen strutted to the front, red blazer practically glowing under the fluorescent lights, clipboard clutched to her chest like a Bible. She cleared her throat, tapped the microphone, and launched into her speech. "Fellow homeowners," she began, her voice syrupy with false righteousness. "We are gathered here tonight to address a serious threat to our community standards. The Taylors have repeatedly disregarded the rules we all agreed to uphold. Their defiance endangers property values, safety, and the harmony of Pinecrest Meadows." I sat in the second row, biting my tongue. My blood simmered as she ranted on, but Laura sat beside me, cool, as a glacier, hands folded neatly in her lap, face unreadable. Karen waved her papers like holy scripture. "They refuse to comply with regulations. They've turned our neighborhood into a spectacle. And their hostility toward your elected president," she gestured dramatically to herself, "cannot stand. Tonight I call for disciplinary action. Fines and, if necessary, removal." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors nodded reluctantly, but many shifted uncomfortably, stealing glances at us. They'd seen the pepper spray incident. They knew who the real threat was. Karen pressed on, desperate to control the room. "Before I open the floor, let me remind you the HOA has the power to enforce its rules. We cannot allow one family to poison our community." And that's when Laura finally rose, slowly, calmly, like a queen taking her place at the throne. The room fell silent. Even Karen's smirk faltered. "My name, Laura," said her voice, cutting through the air like steel, "is Judge Laura Taylor." Gasps echoed. The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in that room snapped to Karen, then back to Laura. "Yes," Laura continued, "you heard correctly. I am a sitting judge with the state of insert state, and I have spent the last 15 years upholding the law in courtrooms far larger than this one. I am intimately familiar with what constitutes harassment, discrimination, and assault, and what has taken place in this neighborhood is all three. Karen stammered. You can't. This is an HOA matter. No, Karen. Laura interrupted, her voice slicing through like a gavel strike. This is a criminal matter. When you pepper sprayed me, you committed assault. When you fined me for medical equipment, you violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. And when you spread lies about me lowering property values because of my disability, you engaged in harassment and discrimination. The neighbors gasped, again whispers erupting. Phones slid discreetly out of pockets, recording every word. Laura's gaze swept across the room, commanding. I came tonight not to defend myself because I have nothing to defend. I came to expose. To remind this community that no board, no president, no clipboard carries more weight than the law, and I promise you justice is coming. I couldn't help it. I leaned back in my chair, folded my arms, and grinned like a kid at the circus. This was better than fireworks. Karen's face turned crimson. She sputtered, tried to wave her clipboard. This is out of order, out of— Laura stepped closer to her, calm, steady. Order is my profession, Karen. You don't dictate it to me. I dictate it to you. The room erupted into applause. Actual applause. Neighbors who'd been cowed by Karen for years clapped, some even cheered. Others looked relieved, as if someone had finally slain the dragon at the gates. Karen froze deer in headlights, eyes darting from the board to the crowd. For the first time she looked small. Laura turned back to the room. I will be filing charges. I will also be pursuing civil remedies for the damages inflicted. And as for this HOA presidency, consider it suspended, effective immediately. The board members, pale and sweating, exchanged frantic looks. One finally leaned into the microphone and muttered, We move to adjourn this meeting. Karen tried to protest, but her voice was drowned by the shuffle of chairs, the buzz of excited whispers, and the flashing of phone cameras. As we walked out together, Laura's hand resting lightly on my arm, I whispered, You didn't just win, honey. You obliterated her. Laura smiled, that dangerous, knowing smile. James, this wasn't the verdict. This was the opening statement. And I believed her, because the gavel hadn't even fallen yet. The morning after that disastrous HOA meeting, you could practically feel the shift in the air around Pinecrest Meadows. For months, Karen's voice had been the only one that echoed down the streets, shrill, commanding, dripping with fake authority. But after last night, the silence from her porch was deafening. The queen had been dethroned, and everyone knew it. But the real reckoning hadn't even begun. A week later, we received the official notice Karen was to appear in court for assault and harassment charges. I almost wanted to frame the letter. I imagined her opening that envelope, her hands trembling, that smug smile evaporating as the reality set in. HOA bylaws couldn't save her from this. Not this time. When the day of the hearing arrived, the courthouse buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread far beyond Pinecrest Meadows. Neighbors showed up, some in support, some just to watch Karen squirm. The local news even sent a crew. Apparently, HOA president assaults disabled woman with pepper spray was juicier than the usual small-town scandals. Laura sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, dressed in a dark suit that radiated authority. She didn't wear her judge's robe, of course, she wasn't presiding today. But even without it, she exuded that same commanding presence. Calm, collected, fearsome. Karen shuffled in with her attorney, her blazer wrinkled her hair, less helmet-like than usual. For the first time since we'd met her, she looked small, nervous. She wouldn't meet anyone's eyes, especially not ours. The judge entered, not Laura obviously, but a colleague who knew her reputation well. The gavel struck. Court is in session. The prosecutor didn't hold back. Exhibit after exhibit rolled out video footage from neighbors' phones, capturing the exact moment Karen sprayed Laura. Photos of the violation tags plastered across our mailbox. Copies of the absurd fines, citing excessive medical equipment. Each piece of evidence stacked higher and higher, building a mountain Karen could never climb. When it was Laura's turn to testify, the room went silent. She rolled forward, hands folded, posture impeccable. Mrs. Taylor, the prosecutor began. Can you describe what happened on the afternoon of June 14th? Laura's voice was steady, unshaken. She recounted everything, Karen's threats, the hiss of the spray, the blinding pain. But she didn't cry, didn't falter. She spoke with precision, like she was delivering a verdict herself. And what impact has this incident had on your daily life? Laura glanced toward Karen, her eyes cold as steel. I've faced bigger bullies in courtrooms, but being assaulted in front of my neighbors in my own yard was a violation beyond physical pain. It was meant to humiliate, to remind me I was less. But I am not less. and I will not allow anyone to make another disabled person feel that way in this community ever again." The words hung heavy in the room. Even the jury looked shaken. Then came Karen's turn. She stumbled through her testimony, her voice shrill, her excuses pathetic. "I feared for my safety," she whined. She was hostile, non-compliant. I was enforcing community rules. The prosecutor pounced. "So your definition of enforcing community rules is physically assaulting a disabled woman?" Karen's face flushed, crimson. Well, that's not what I meant." The judge cut her off. "Stick to the facts, Mrs. Morgan." Watching her unravel was like watching a badly built dam burst. All her arrogance, all her fake confidence leaked out in real time. By the time closing arguments rolled around, the outcome was obvious. The jury didn't deliberate long. Guilty, on all counts. The judge's voice thundered through the courtroom. "Mrs. Morgan, your actions were not only unlawful but reprehensible. You are hereby sentenced to probation, mandatory community service, and a fine payable to the plaintiff. Furthermore, a restraining order is granted barring you from contact with the Taylors." The gavel struck and that was it. Karen's head dropped. The mighty HOA president reduced to nothing more than a disgraced bully with a criminal record. But the story didn't end in the courtroom. Oh no. Back in Pinecrest Meadows, word spread like wildfire. Karen's porch, once the center of her little kingdom, now stood abandoned. Neighbors who once followed her orders avoided her like the plague. Parents pulled their kids closer when she walked by. Some even crossed the street entirely. And the HOA board. They scrambled to save face, issuing public apologies, promising reforms, and distancing themselves from their fallen queen. But the damage was done. Karen's reign of terror was over. One evening, a few weeks later, I sat on our porch beside Laura. The summer cicadas hummed the sky, blazed orange with sunset. A couple of neighbors strolled by and waved warmly. "Glad you're still here," one said. Another added, "About time someone put her in her place." Laura smiled politely, sipping her tea. But when they walked off, she leaned closer to me and whispered, "It was never about putting her in her place, James. It was about reminding her she never had one." I laughed, shaking my head. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." She smirked, eyes glinting in the fading light. "Smart man." And just like that, the balance of Pinecrest Meadows shifted forever. The neighbors had seen the truth. The law had spoken. And Karen, she was finished. But me, I learned something else entirely. I learned that justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it sits right beside you on the porch, sipping tea, waiting patiently for the right moment to strike. If you had told me 6 months earlier that my quiet suburban dream would end with the HOA president sitting on the curb in tears, mascara streaked down her cheeks, I'd have laughed in your face. But that's exactly what Pinecrest Meadows looked like after Judgment Day. Karen didn't just lose in court. She lost everything that gave her power. The HOA board voted her out unanimously. Her so-called allies, the ones who once clapped for her speeches and nodded at her endless citations, abandoned her overnight. No one wanted to be associated with the woman who pepper-sprayed a disabled judge on camera. The neighborhood shifted almost instantly. People who used to whisper behind our backs now stopped by the porch to drop off pies, casseroles, even apologies. One older couple admitted, "We never liked the way she ran things, but we were too afraid to speak up." Others confessed that Karen had bullied them 2 fines for flower beds that weren't symmetrical, threats over mailbox paint, even warnings about overly festive holiday decorations. Turns out Laura and I weren't her first victims. We were just the first ones who fought back. And fight back we did. The civil case moved forward and Karen's bank account took a hit she couldn't hide. Between legal fees, fines, and damages, her finances bled dry. Rumors swirled about her mortgage falling behind. Her once pristine lawn grew patchy, her shrubs went untrimmed. For a woman obsessed with aesthetic harmony, it was the ultimate irony. Her own house became the eyesore she always accused others of creating. One evening I came home to find Karen sitting on her porch steps staring blankly at the street. No clipboard, no blazer, just a hollow look in her eyes. She glanced at me, opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came. For the first time I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered the hiss of that pepper spray, the way Laura had gasped for breath, the smugness on Karen's face as she claimed it was self-defense. That memory burned away any sympathy. Laura, of course, was unshaken. She never gloated, never rubbed it in. She didn't have to. Her presence alone, calm, dignified, unbending, was reminder enough. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch sipping sweet tea, Laura leaned toward me. "You notice how quiet it is." I looked around. No clicking heels, no clipboard-wielding patrols. just the hum of cicadas, kids laughing on bicycles, and neighbors actually enjoying themselves. It's almost peaceful, I said. Laura smirked. Funny what happens when you remove the tyrant from the throne. The real twist, though, came a month later. The county announced a review of HOA conduct across the region, triggered in part by Karen's case. Apparently, word had spread beyond Pinecrest Meadows, and the state legislature wasn't thrilled about rogue neighborhood dictators running around with pepper spray and unchecked authority. Laura was invited to testify not as a victim this time, but as an expert. She stood in front of lawmakers, eloquent and razor-sharp, outlining how HOAs abused their power, how homeowners were silenced, and how people with disabilities were targeted under the guise of aesthetic standards. When she finished, the chamber erupted in applause. And just like that, Karen's foolishness had sparked something bigger than our cul-de-sac drama. It became the catalyst for reform. Sitting in the gallery, I couldn't help but grin. Karen wanted us gone. Instead, she accidentally handed my wife a platform to make life better for thousands of homeowners across the state. That's the thing about bullies, they always dig their own graves. By the time we drove back into Pinecrest Meadows that night, the sun was setting behind the houses, painting the sky in gold and crimson. Laura reached over, squeezed my hand, and whispered, "Justice doesn't always come in the way you expect, but it always comes." I believed her. I always would. Because in the end, Karen's downfall wasn't just about us. It was about everyone she'd trampled along the way. And while she faded into obscurity, Laura's legend only grew. To this day, neighbors still call her the judge on the porch. And me, I just thank my lucky stars. I married the one woman no HOA bully should ever cross. This whole ordeal taught me something I'll never forget. Bullies thrive in silence. They grow stronger when people shrug and say, "That's just how things are." But the moment someone stands up, not with fists, but with truth, patience, and resolve, the bully collapses under their own weight. My wife could have played the victim. She could have retreated, closed the blinds, and let Karen rule the neighborhood. But she didn't. She showed me and everyone around us that strength isn't about how loud you shout or how many fines you write. It's about standing firm, calm, and unyielding in the face of injustice. If you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, a workplace tyrant, or even just a petty neighbor with too much time on their hands, remember this: you are never powerless. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't yelling back. It's letting them dig their hole and then watching justice fill it in. So tell me, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Drop your answer in the comments, and let's compare war stories. And if you want more wild tales of HOAs gone rogue, don't forget to subscribe. Trust me, the drama never ends.